Good evening and welcome to Entre Artistas, where tonight we will speak with Johannes Raab about his project Imag For All, which will take place in Mexico next year. Good evening, Mr. Raab, and thank you for your time. Can you give us a brief introduction to your Imag project?
The Imag in general or the Imag For All?
Both, please.
We founded the Imag, the International Music Academy Germany, at the beginning of last year. It is a music academy focusing on online teaching. The concept of online music lessons is not entirely new. It has been out there for about 10 years, but it never really established itself. Only today we reached a technical level which allows us to make proper online teaching possible, and due to the COVID pandemic, digital life has become a lot more normal. Huge parts of our daily lives has been transferred to digital platforms like meetings, etc., and especially all kinds of education. The moment you get used to digital lessons, the benefits become obvious. For example, we are able to connect students and teachers across continents. And I believe I may say that the level of our professors is uniquely high.
Ein international einzigartig hohes Niveau an Lehrern in der Imag.
Opening up the scope of my answer, I have to say that in Germany, cultural education and cultural offers are very important and therefore a totally natural part of our lives.
Etwas sehr Wichtiges und dementsprechend auch etwas irgendwo selbstverständlich.
There are many countries where the situation is different, and even though the Imag is a business-oriented enterprise, we naturally see ourselves as a cultural institution and feel an obligation to do our part in matters of education. And that is the reason why it was of utmost importance to me from the very first start of the Imag that we would start a non-profit education outreach program, which is the Imag For All. As a result of these thoughts, we will realize our first already very ambitious project in Mexico in 2023.
Im nächsten Jahr schon in Mexiko geplant.
You already addressed the topic a little, but could you tell more about what was the situation that created the necessity to create the Imag?
Was heißt Notwendigkeit? Anders gesagt, es war die Möglichkeit, wahrscheinlich sehr einmalig.
Well, let's not say necessity. It was quite the opposite. It was rather an opportunity and I guess a singular one.
Plötzlich mal Zeit hatten. So, also der Tourkalender war leer.
We founded the Imag mid-pandemic in a situation where musicians of that scale actually had the time to think about a project like this. Their schedules were empty and they had nothing to do like all of us.
Glaube ich überhaupt geglückt, ein so hochkarätiges Ensemble an Lehrern auf jedem Instrument haben wir da.
In this context, the opportunity arose to start a great project, and this way we could take on international stars for every instrument.
Notwendigkeit, es war aber eine vielleicht einzigartige Möglichkeit durch dieses Off dieser Pandemie einfach.
Imag For All is conducting its first outreach in Mexico in 2023. Why did the Imag choose Mexico for its start of the program?
Das ist eine sehr gute Frage. Es hat einige Gründe.
That's an excellent question. I can tell you a few reasons actually. First of all, you have to start somewhere, and since I am the one in the team who manages the Imag For All, and I have been to Bolivia before with a quite similar project, I really wanted to bring the Imag For All to Latin America first.
Von unserem Team wollte unbedingt in Südamerika das erste Projekt machen.
Since our project is already quite ambitious, it was very important to me that we could come to a country which already has a functioning cultural infrastructure.
Zu gehen, was schon von selbst aber auch eine gute Infrastruktur für Bildung und Altes hat.
And during the planning of our project, I've learned that Mexico is particularly affected by cuts in public funds for culture due to the pandemic. We feel the need to counter this negative development with a positive engagement, even though we know this contribution can only be of symbolical character. And I'm happy to say that we already could help at some points.
Zum Zweiten, sehr wichtiges Argument.
And as I said before, it was super important to us to start right at the beginning after founding the IMAG with a project like this. That is not only ambitious, it's actually a little crazy, to be honest.
Das ist nicht nur ambitioniert, das ist eigentlich ein bisschen verrückt, wenn man ganz ehrlich ist. Und das wäre absolut nicht möglich, wenn es nicht meine sehr, sehr gute Freundin Yolanda...
And all this would not be possible without my great friend Yolanda Enriquez Mendez, who is the executive manager of this project and pours all her passion into it. It truly would be impossible to plan the whole project without her. And for sure, this is also one of the reasons we chose Mexico as our first destination. It is a very special and great collaboration and I'm totally happy about it.
Da bin ich auch sehr, sehr, sehr glücklich drüber.
One of the goals of this project is to reach a public that has had little contact with classical music so far. How will you engage this type of public in Mexico and make classical music appeal to them?
Also diese Frage kann man ganz generell stellen. Das hat überhaupt gar nichts erstmal mit Mexiko zu tun.
Actually, this question aims towards a problem which does not only exist in Mexico but all over the world. Classical music today has a rather small audience in comparison to other kinds of music, and it's a bit struggling to reach young people. But as I said, that's not an only Mexican problem, and as we who work on and with classical music every day are passionate about the idea to change that and are convinced it will be worthwhile.
Weil es sich unglaublich lohnt. Da haben sich schon Konzertdramaturgen und Musikvermittler seit Leonard Bernstein in Generationen...
Generations of dramaturgists since Leonard Bernstein have racked their brains about that problem, and there's surely no universal solution to it.
Aber es gibt natürlich verschiedene Ansätze.
But there are different approaches. One of them is, which is already done here regularly, charging lower prices for tickets to get people to come to classical concerts. And then you can put lighter pieces on the program, not the very heavy and difficult ones, rather the ones easier to digest, maybe even cross over, to offer an easy entry into classical music.
Was ein guter Einstieg ist. Ich für meinen Teil, ich habe da gar nichts dagegen, ich für meinen Teil fühle mich aber wohler damit.
I'm not opposed to that idea, but I feel more comfortable with trusting the music we have been making our entire lives. We know how good that music is, it once won us over and is convincing us of its qualities every day.
Finde ich das Normalste von der Welt, einfach zu sagen...
Therefore, it feels totally normal to plan concerts with just the greatest music we can think of and trust that the music will exhilarate the audience as much as it exhilarates us.
Mitreißen, wie es einen selber ja auch mitreißt.
Können Sie noch etwas genauer darauf eingehen?
Could you go into detail a little bit more how you are going to find a public that is outside of the scope of classical music? Because even when the ticket prices are low, there surely will be people who won't immediately say, "Ah yes, that's what I will spend my money
Genau
on."
dafür will ich jetzt mein Geld ausgeben.
Ja, völlig richtige, berechtigte Frage.
Entirely right, that's a totally legitimate question. Even if I play the greatest music, the people who haven't been in contact with classical music before won't be there. That would have no effect.
Macht ja dann keinen Unterschied, völlig richtig. Aber Sir Francis Bacon hat mal gesagt...
But paraphrasing Sir Francis Bacon, if Muhammad will not come to the mountain, then the mountain will have to go to Muhammad. And that is how we have to try to tackle that problem, naturally not only that way, but partly. We are not only planning concerts in concert halls and special venues, but we will actually go to where the people are, on marketplaces, in churches, in schools, to naturally try to reach the people at places where classical music usually is not heard.
Dort versucht zu erreichen, ja, wo eben sonst klassische Musik vielleicht nicht so ist.
Can you expand on the social effects of classical music that the project wants to create in Mexican musicians?
Also die Frage nach der...
The question of the impact of classical music on society, the impact of culture on humans, is of course a tricky and difficult one. When you think that through consequently, you quickly end up in sociology and philosophy.
Ist man da ganz schnell, ganz tief in der Soziologie und eigentlich in der Philosophie drin? Ja, was sind die...
But what are the substantial aspects of binding together society? Probably as a musician, I am not the right person to answer that question, because that is an entirely different thematic field. But as an artist and musician, I can say that it is a fact that the arts and culture have always been in continuous relations to the society in which they emerge from.
Immer in einem kontinuierlichen Bezug zu der Gesellschaft steht, in der sie entsteht. Und dass Kunst und Kultur halt alle möglichen...
And that the arts pick up all aspects of social life and process them with the abstraction by the arts, but in an emotional way. In my opinion, that is very valuable to any society.
Auf eine ganz emotionale Art und Weise. Und das ist eine sehr wertvolle Geschichte in der Gesellschaft, finde ich.
The other aspect is, when you look at the history of different societies, you will notice a correlation between open, liberal societies and a prospering culture. So, when you turn this around, you may determine that a society will always profit from a thriving and healthy cultural life in matters of individuality, freedom and liberty, and humanity in general.
Hilft und dass es gut ist für eine Gesellschaft, eine blühende Kultur zu haben.
These aspects, maybe today more than ever, are extremely important for any society, and we should try to reinforce them. Difficult question.
Mehr als jemals ganz wichtig sind und die wir in unserer Gesellschaft auch sehr stärken sollten. Insofern schwere Frage.
You once said that prejudices often become obstacles on the pathway into classical music, but that music has the power to clear away all misconception. What type of prejudices and obstacles on the pathway into classical music are you speaking of, and what kind of misconceptions will be cleared up?
Naja, wir leben in der Zeit von TikTok und Instagram.
Well, we live in times of TikTok and Instagram, and we get used more and more to very simple and short times of media like Reels, and even videos are going out of fashion on Instagram because a minute is already too long now. I get the impression that the attention span of people is becoming shorter and shorter. You won't even wait at the bus stop without pulling out your phone. I am the same, by the way. I'm not excluding myself from all this. But in general, you can say that the fear of the possibility of getting bored has become gigantic.
Ich will da gar nicht ausklammern. Aber generell ist es so, dass die Angst vor Langeweile gigantisch wird.
In this context, a symphony of 90 minutes by Bruckner might be quite a challenge for some. And that's not a prejudice, that's a hard fact to begin with.
Die Vorurteile, die dann dazukommen, sind...
The prejudices that add up to that are the ones we are actually taught by pop culture. We learn that classical music is boring, tiring, and only nerds and losers are interested in it. So hands off, we don't want that, that's not cool. And all those are just prejudices. And they are really wrong. I can really tell from my own experience they are wrong. And it's a pity, because young people are confronted with these prejudices at an age where they haven't formed their own opinions yet. And they will probably say, no, go away with it, I don't want that, and won't get the chance to make up their own minds.
Und die werden sich gar kein Bild machen können. Und ich muss persönlich sagen, ich habe halt das...
I personally have to say that I'm very lucky to have grown up in a family with parents for whom culture and of course classical music has always been a very important part of their lives, and that made it normal for me from the very first day. We weren't asked if we wanted to learn an instrument, it just was mandatory. And we didn't complain or even think about it because we had already listened to that music before we were even born.
Das heißt, als ich konfrontiert worden bin mit diesen Vorurteilen...
That means when I was confronted with these prejudices, it was already too late. I already knew that classical music was really cool stuff and that I was interested in it, and the prejudices couldn't mean anything to me. Having this in mind, as a part of all our education projects, we have to try to reach the kids before they have come into contact with these prejudices. And in children's concerts, and there even are concerts for babies now, which are actually sometimes a little unfamiliar situations for us musicians because the audience is not so quietly listening to what we are used to. Every time I get to witness children sitting there amazed with big eyes, laughing, maybe even crying and feeling a whole range of
Die
emotions.
das ganz wahnsinnig spannend finden und toll finden und weinen und
Afterwards you think, yeah, that's really uncool what we're doing here. And that's really, really great. And the sooner we get people to get in touch with our music, the better are our chances to convince them. That's the point. And for the second part of your question, we just have to trust the music. It has the power to win us all over. Because it is really good. And it is so rich, so full of all aspects of being human, a spectrum of emotions. We are not only talking about music meant to just entertain here. It is a highly complex art form made by the best musicians of hundreds and hundreds of years. So we are talking about the sheer essence, the best music ever written. So we just have to put our trust into the music, and everyone who gives it a shot will be moved by it.
Wie Sie gerade meinen,
As you just said, classical music is very diverse. What type of music and which composers do you want to use developing your project? And why did you choose this repertoire and what impact do you want to create with it?
Sie mit diesem Repertoire erzeugen.
ja, es ist eigentlich nochmal, ich greife nochmal auf die Frage vorher.
Concerning that, I quickly have to come back to the last question. When I remember my own experiences, and those of other musicians I know, and of music lovers I have spoken to, we all have that one memory of the very first moment where we were totally blown away by music.
Wo es uns einmal so richtig weggeblasen hat. Wo wir einfach unvoreingenommen im Konzert
When we were either sitting in a concert or listening to a recording, completely candidly, and in my case it actually was a recording, and it floored us completely. And that moment, one could say this wow moment, we have to try to create as musicians as often as we can. By the way, not only just in education projects. It has to be our task always in every concert to create as many wow moments for as many people as possible. When you always try to do that, you are the best ambassador for our art. Consequently, this is exactly what we're going to try in Mexico as well.
irgendwie diese Wow-Momente zu kreieren. Das Repertoire wird natürlich vorgeschrieben, ein bisschen dadurch, in welcher Kombination man spielt. Ist es Solo, ist es Kammermusik, ist es mit...
The repertoire is partly already given by the musical genre, if I play solo, chamber music or a solo concerto with orchestra. But it's my plan to bring only pieces of music which give me those wow moments. Music which I admire and love for many years already. Of course, I will bring some Bach, then Lalo cello concerto and a lot more romantic pieces and some others. Most importantly, music that I love.
Lalos Cello-Konzert dabei sein. Da wird ganz viel romantische Cello-Musik dabei sein. Ja, und ich lass mir da auch noch was anderes einfallen, aber ich werde wirklich nur Musik mitbringen, die ich selbst liebe.
The first Imag cello competition is called Manuel Maria Ponce. Why did you choose this composer to name your first cello competition in Mexico? And will there be a compulsory round for the competitors where they will play music by Manuel Maria Ponce?
Also, ja, normalerweise, wenn man so einen Wettbewerb ins Leben ruft, wird der Wettbewerb...
Well, most of the times when a competition is founded, it will be called after its founder. In this case, that would be me. But in my age, I would find that pretty goofy, and I don't need that for myself. We are aware that we are coming to Mexico with its own great cultural identity, which has a lot to offer, with great composers like Manuel Maria Ponce in the past, and José Elizondo, for example, now, a dear friend of mine whom I admire a lot.
In der Gegenwart, wie José Elizondo zum Beispiel, den ich ganz toll finde und sehr schätze und sehr mag, auch persönlich.
And to me it is also a gesture of respect. I don't want to imply that I think I'm coming from the great Europe to bring you the culture. You have a great culture of your own, and in terms of classical music, very inspiring artists and great orchestras. It's rather an exchange and growing together while making music. Furthermore, it needs to be said that Manuel Maria Ponce is one of the greatest Mexican composers, and he also wrote a lot for the cello. So it was really easy for me to make that decision. And of course, it's a mark of respect.
Lag ziemlich im Strafraum, wie man im Fußball sagt. Und ja, das ist einfach auch wirklich ein Zeichen des Respekts. Achso, zweiter Teil der Frage. Nein, es ist nicht.
For the second part of your question, no, it's not mandatory to play a work by Manuel Maria Ponce. And I've put a lot of thought into what repertoire should be played at this competition. In general, I don't know the technical level of the young local cellists. And I don't want to request most difficult repertoire and therefore risk to exclude a big part of people from the competition by maybe overstraining them with a given repertoire. Ponce is actually quite demanding and, more importantly, not part of the standard repertoire. So it's not mandatory, but I would be very, very happy to get to listen to some Ponce played by some participants.
Von Menschen, die da mitmachen, aber es ist nicht Pflicht.
What musical aspects will the jury be judging during the competition?
Das ist super schwer übrigens. Natürlich werden wir das Cello spielen, also
That is super difficult to say. Of course, we will judge the technical aspects of the playing. Then we will of course judge the interpretation, meaning the maturity and mastery of an own interpretation of the piece. And as third aspect, because we will deal with young musicians who are not yet done with their studies and maybe not fully developed. By the way, that's another question. When are you done learning as a musician? Are we ever? So the third aspect is something you can call talent or potential. How may the participant develop in the future? What is still hidden maybe? That is also important to us and will be considered by the jury.
Diejenige noch entwickeln, was steckt da noch drin? Und das ist uns auch schon auch wichtig und das kommt auch als Faktor noch in die Bewertung mit hinein.
We know that the IMAG will be active in Mexico and Bolivia. Are there any other Latin American countries that the IMAG is planning to visit with projects?
Wenn du mich fragst, es ist ja so, wir finden...
Well, if you ask me, because we think these kind of projects are super important and meaningful, and I have to say, I personally think they are just great, we would actually love to be in every country, every year, with teachers for every instrument. Of course, that's a little bit too ambitious for right now, but actually that is the plan for the future, to reach as many young people from as many countries possible. And sure, Latin America is on top of the list.
Südamerika steht da auch total oben auf der Liste.
That would be all from my side. Thank you for the interview, Mr. Raab.
Vielen Dank, hat mich sehr gefreut.
My pleasure, thank you.